He offered a blanket to a homeless girl trembling in the rain, never knowing she was the daughter of the billionaire who ruined his life, or that she'd become the woman who healed his heart. The rain came down in relentless sheets, the kind that turned the city into a blur of lights and ghosts. Inside his corner office, high above the skyline, Ethan Cole stood in silence, watching the water streak across the glass. The city below sparkled like it was alive, but he'd long stopped feeling a part of it. Money, power, success. Words that once meant something, now empty echoes in rooms too big for one man's heart. His reflection stared back at him, tired eyes beneath a mask of control. At 36, Ethan had built a billion-dollar empire from the ashes of failure, his father's failure. 15 years ago, a ruthless businessman named Arthur Monroe had swallowed his father's small company whole, leaving their family in ruins. Ethan had promised himself then that he'd never be powerless again. And he wasn't. But as the years passed, the higher he climbed, the lonelier it became. Every smile at a gala was rehearsed, every handshake strategic. Success had given him everything except peace. His assistant's voice broke through the stillness over the intercom. "Mr. Cole, the driver's waiting. The charity event starts in 20 minutes. Ethan's lips twitched. A charity event. Another night pretending he cared. Another night proving to the world that he had a heart. He grabbed his coat, stepped into the elevator, and whispered to himself as the doors closed, "You have everything. So why does it still feel like nothing?" Outside, the city glistened under rain and neon. His driver maneuvered through slick streets while Ethan stared blankly at the window. Then someone caught his eye. A figure huddled under a flickering streetlight, knees drawn to her chest, drenched and trembling. "Stop the car," he said suddenly. "Sir." "Stop the car." Ethan stepped into the storm, the cold slicing through his tailored suit. The young woman didn't look up at first, her soaked hair plastered to her face. When she finally did, he saw eyes the color of dusk, soft, frightened, and defiant all at once. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. She flinched at the sound, as if kindness were a foreign language. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her skin was pale from the cold, her hands shaking as she tried to stand. Without thinking, he slipped off his coat and draped it around her shoulders. The weight of it made her shiver again, but differently this time, as though warmth had startled her. "There's a diner across the street," he said. "Come on. You'll get sick out here." "I don't need your help," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Everyone says that right before they fall," he replied softly. Something in his tone, quiet, unassuming, but steady, made her hesitate. And for the first time in weeks, she let someone help her stand. Inside the diner, the air smelled of coffee and fried eggs. A waitress raised an eyebrow as they slid into a booth, dripping rainwater. Ethan ordered soup and tea without asking what she wanted. She stared at the steam rising from the bowl but didn't move. "You can eat," he said after a moment. "I'm not watching." Her fingers brushed the edge of the bowl, hesitant. Then she took a spoonful, and another, each one slower than the last, like she was afraid the food would vanish if she hurried. When she finally looked up, her voice was barely audible. "Why are you helping me?" He leaned back, eyes calm. "Maybe because someone once helped me when I didn't deserve it." She studied him. There was no pity in his eyes, just quiet humanity, the kind she hadn't seen in months. She wanted to ask more, but the words tangled in her throat. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. Her real name felt dangerous, like a secret that could shatter the fragile safety of this moment. "Lila," she said softly. "Just Lila." "Lila," he repeated, the name fitting oddly comfortably in his mouth. "I'm Ethan." They fell into a silence that wasn't awkward, just full. The sound of rain against the window, the clink of dishes, the soft hum of a jukebox in the corner. It felt, for a fleeting second, like they were the only two people left in the world. When they stepped back outside, the rain had eased into a mist. Lila stood there, shivering again but unwilling to admit it. Ethan turned to her, his brow furrowed. "Do you have somewhere to stay?" Her silence was answer enough. He sighed, hands in his pocket. "I have a guest house. It's empty, clean, and safe. You can stay there until you figure things out." Her eyes widened, suspicious, uncertain. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" His smile was faint but warm. "Because maybe you're not a stranger. Not to who I used to be." She wanted to refuse. Pride told her to. But the exhaustion in her bones screamed louder. Finally, she nodded. "Only for a few days," she murmured. "A few days," he agreed. "No strings." As his car pulled away, she glanced out the window, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and blue. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. She didn't know who Ethan Cole really was, and he didn't know who she used to be. But something about this night, this man, felt like the start of something she couldn't yet name. And as Ethan looked at her reflection in the glass, he felt something too. A flicker of warmth, fragile but real, the kind he hadn't felt since before life hardened him. He didn't know why, but something told him he hadn't found her by accident. Have you ever met someone who entered your life at the exact moment you needed them, without you realizing why? Tell us in the comments below. The morning light spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan Cole's penthouse, painting the marble floors in soft gold. Lila stirred awake on the couch of the guesthouse, her fingers clutching the edge of a thick blanket that smelled faintly of cedar and rain. For a moment she forgot where she was. The warmth, the quiet, the absence of sirens or hunger, it all felt foreign. She sat up slowly, her eyes catching the faint reflection of the city skyline beyond the window. She'd dreamed of rooms like this once, back when she was still someone, before the world fell apart. She pressed a trembling hand to her stomach, as though steadying herself against memories she wasn't ready to face. A soft knock at the door pulled her back. "You awake?" Ethan's voice came through, low and careful. Lila hesitated, then murmured, "Yeah, come in." He stepped inside holding a tray, coffee, toast, and fruit. Not extravagant but kind. He wasn't dressed in a suit today. Just jeans, a white shirt, sleeves rolled, eyes softer than last night. "Didn't know what you liked," he said. "So I went with everything that looked edible." She blinked, surprised by the hint of humor. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled faintly and set the tray down. "There's a closet in there," he added. "Some old clothes my sister left when she stayed here last summer. You might find something that fits." Her guard twitched upward again. "Why are you doing all this?" He leaned against the wall, his gaze steady. "Because you look like you haven't been shown basic decency in a while. And because I can." The simplicity of his answer disarmed her. No pity. No agenda. Just honesty. After he left, Lila changed into a soft gray sweater and jeans that hung loose on her thin frame. She caught her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. A girl who once wore designer gowns now standing barefoot in borrowed clothes. She almost laughed at the irony. Later that afternoon, she wandered into the garden terrace behind the main house. The city hummed in the distance, muted by the sound of rustling leaves. Ethan was there, kneeling by a small patch of soil, sleeves rolled, dirt on his hands. It startled her. The billionaire CEO tending to plants like it was therapy. "Didn't think you'd be the gardening type," she said softly. He looked up, smiling without looking surprised. "You'd be surprised what people do to stay sane." She hesitated, then crouched beside him. "Can I help?" He handed her a small trowel. "You ever planted anything before?" She shook her head. "Not really. My father never liked dirt under nails." Ethan chuckled. "He sounds like a real charmer." She smiled, a tiny, flickering thing. "You have no idea." They worked in silence for a while. Dirt under her nails felt strangely liberating. She couldn't remember the last time she'd done something so normal. The air smelled of rain and rosemary. When she looked at Ethan, His focus wasn't on his phone or a spreadsheet, it was on the soil, the life growing from it. "You built all this?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "After my father died, I needed something real. Something I couldn't buy. Does it help?" "Some days." He looked at her then, really looked. "Some days it just reminds me that growth takes time. And patience I don't always have." The way he said it made her chest ache. She wanted to ask about his father, about the shadows in his eyes, but she didn't. Instead, she just sat there, hands covered in earth, heart quietly breaking open in ways she didn't expect. That evening, he invited her to dinner in the main house. Nothing formal, pasta, wine, and quiet music humming in the background. The table between them felt both intimate and uncertain. "So," he said after a long pause, "what did you do before all this?" Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. "This? You don't look like someone who's been on the streets long," he said gently. "You carry yourself like you used to stand taller." She forced a small laugh. "I guess I used to. But life has a way of teaching humility." He didn't press. There was no interrogation in his eyes, only curiosity laced with something deeper, empathy. She finally looked up, meeting his gaze. "What about you? You always wanted to be a CEO?" He exhaled, leaning back. "No. I wanted to build something my father could be proud of. But I got so busy proving myself, I forgot what pride was supposed to feel like." Their eyes held. Two people on opposite ends of the world, both haunted by ghosts of the past. When thunder rumbled outside again, she flinched. Ethan noticed the small tremor in her hands. "You okay?" "Yeah," she whispered. "Just not a fan of storms." He stood, grabbed a blanket from the couch, and wrapped it around her shoulders without a word. The gesture was gentle, protective. She didn't realize she was crying until he brushed away a tear with his thumb. "You don't have to be strong here, Lila," he said softly. "Not with me." Her breath caught. The tenderness in his voice broke something open inside her, something she thought she'd buried with her old life. She wanted to tell him everything right then, who she really was, why she'd run, what she'd lost, but fear silenced her. If he knew the truth, he might throw her out before she could explain. So she said the only thing she could. "Thank you." He smiled, his eyes lingering a moment too long. "Get some rest. You look like someone who hasn't slept in weeks." As he walked away, Lila watched him go, her heart pounding harder than it should. She pressed her palm to her chest and whispered to herself, "Don't fall. Not again." But somewhere deep down, she already knew it was too late. That night, as the rain whispered against the windows, both of them lay awake in different rooms, thinking about the same thing, the stranger who suddenly felt familiar. For the next few days, the house felt strangely alive, laughter echoing faintly in rooms that had long been silent. Ethan told himself it was just because someone else was there, breaking the stillness. It had nothing to do with her. Or so he tried to believe. He buried himself in work, hosting back-to-back meetings in his study, eyes glued to spreadsheets that refused to hold his focus. Every time he tried to think of profit margins, Lila's quiet smile crept into the edges of his mind, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way her eyes softened when she looked at the garden. It was infuriating. He was a man of control, a CEO who didn't make emotional decisions. He'd built his empire on reason, not feelings. But Lila Carter, the woman who'd appeared in the rain like some fragile miracle, was undoing that control thread by thread. He tried to create distance, told her she was welcome to stay until she got back on her feet, but insisted his schedule was too busy to talk. Lila didn't protest. If anything, she seemed relieved. She spent her days cleaning the guest house, cooking small meals, and tending to the garden when she thought he wasn't watching. But every night, when the lights dimmed, she'd catch her reflection in the window, and the ache in her chest reminded her she was living a lie. She shouldn't be here. She shouldn't feel safe in his home. shouldn't smile when he passed her in the hallway, shouldn't catch herself wondering what his laugh would sound like if he ever really let go. Because if he knew the truth, who she really was, the daughter of billionaire Charles Carter, he wouldn't just turn her away. He'd hate her. And worse, she wouldn't blame him. The tension came to a head one Friday afternoon. Ethan came home earlier than usual, his tie loosened, his expression clouded from a meeting gone bad. He found Lila in the kitchen, standing on her tiptoes trying to reach a jar from the top shelf. "Careful," he said, stepping behind her before she could fall. His hand brushed hers as he took the jar down. Electricity sparked between them, sharp and undeniable. She froze, staring up at him. "I could have managed." He didn't step back. "Maybe. But why risk it?" Their eyes locked. The air grew thick with the kind of silence that says everything words can't. Finally, Lila dropped her gaze. "You shouldn't do that." "Do what?" he asked, his voice low. "Look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like I matter." Her words hit him square in the chest. He wanted to say "you do matter," but the weight of his past kept his tongue still. The last time he'd cared about someone, it had ended in betrayal. Love had turned to loss, and he'd sworn never to feel that helpless again. Instead, he exhaled, stepping back. "You should get some rest." She nodded, but her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. The next morning, she was gone. At first, Ethan thought she'd just gone for a walk. But when hours passed and her bag was missing, panic clawed through him. He called out her name, searched the garden, the guest house, even the street outside. Nothing. He didn't understand why it hurt so much, this sudden emptiness in his home. He told himself it was just concern, a sense of responsibility. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. She had become the quiet heartbeat of his days. He spent the evening pacing his study, torn between anger and worry. Why would she leave? He muttered under his breath. What was she running from? Just as he reached for his phone, headlights swept across the driveway. Lila stumbled through the gate, her hair damp from the drizzle, her eyes red. He stormed toward her. "Where the hell did you go?" She flinched at his tone. "I needed air." "Air? You disappear for 12 hours without a word, and you call that needing air?" Her chin lifted, defensive now. "You made it clear I shouldn't be here, Ethan. I was just saving us both the trouble." His anger cracked into frustration. "That's not what I said." "It's what you meant," she said softly. He froze. Her words pierced deeper than he wanted to admit. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't stay here pretending this is normal. You're kind, but you don't even know who I am." "Then tell me," he said, voice trembling with something raw. "Tell me who you are." Her lips parted, but fear silenced her again. "Not yet. Not until she was ready." "I can't," she said finally. Ethan stared at her, hurt flashing across his face before he turned away. "Then I don't know how to help you." She swallowed hard, watching him walk back into the house, the door closing between them with a quiet finality that sounded a lot like heartbreak. That night, rain poured again. Lila stood under the awning of the guest house, staring out into the storm. For a moment, she almost walked away for good. But something in her chest, a stubborn, aching thing, refused to leave. Inside, Ethan sat at his desk, unable to work, the sound of the storm matching the chaos in his mind. He replayed her words over and over. "You don't even know who I am." He whispered to the empty room. "Then why does it feel like I've known you all my life? Have you ever tried to push someone away because you were afraid to care too much? Tell us in the comments. We'd love to hear your story." The rain didn't stop for 3 straight days. It fell in unbroken sheets, drumming against the windows, drowning the silence that had settled between them. Ethan tried to keep his distance, to pretend things hadn't shifted, but the storm had other plans. Late on the 3rd night, the power went out. He found Lila in the kitchen, barefoot, clutching a flashlight. "Generator's down," she said softly. "I checked the fuse box, but..." Ethan exhaled, grabbing a coat. Stay inside. I'll fix it. She frowned. You'll get soaked. I've been through worse. He headed out into the rain, but minutes later, she was right behind him, umbrella in hand. Lila, he said, turning sharply. What are you doing? Helping, she said simply. I can hold the light. He wanted to argue, but the sight of her, soaked, shivering, stubborn, made something in him soften. So, he didn't. They worked in silence, the storm roaring around them. Lightning illuminated her face, pale, determined, streaked with rain, and he realized she wasn't fragile. She was fierce. Stronger than he'd ever given her credit for. When the generator finally sputtered back to life, she laughed, a breathless, beautiful sound that cut through the darkness. And for the first time in years, Ethan found himself laughing too. Back inside, the power flickered on, but the house was freezing. Ethan went to grab extra blankets, tossing one toward her. You'll catch a cold. Only if you do, she said, smiling faintly. Something shifted in the air again, that dangerous, delicate gravity pulling them closer. She sat on the couch by the fire, her hair still damp, wrapped in a blanket that looked far too big for her small frame. Ethan hesitated, then sat across from her, the firelight dancing between them. You really shouldn't have come out there, he said quietly. I wasn't going to let you get electrocuted, she replied. He chuckled under his breath. You're impossible. So are you. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, there was no rain, no distance, no secrets. Just two people suspended in a fragile, unfamiliar peace. The fire cracked, the room dimming into a warm hush. Lila's voice broke the quiet. You ever get tired of being strong? Ethan blinked, caught off guard. What do you mean? She turned the blanket in her hands, staring at the threads. You walk like someone who's holding the whole world together. But I wonder if anyone's ever asked who holds you. He froze. No one had ever said something like that to him before. I don't need anyone to hold me, he said after a moment, the words sounding colder than he meant them to. Lila nodded slowly. That's what people say right before they fall apart. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the same exhaustion mirrored in her eyes. The kind that comes from carrying too much alone. She wasn't just some lost girl. She was running from something too. Who hurt you, Lila? He asked softly. Her fingers tightened on the blanket. You don't want to know. I think I do. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Not tonight. He nodded, accepting it. But deep down, he knew whatever she was hiding was the reason she couldn't leave, and couldn't stay either. The next morning, the roads were flooded, cutting off access to town. Lila was stuck there, with him, until further notice. Ethan tried to convince himself it was an inconvenience. But when he found her making coffee in his kitchen, humming under her breath like she'd been doing it for years, he knew the truth. Part of him didn't want the roads to clear. Days passed like that, quiet, strange, domestic. They cooked together, talked about everything except the things that mattered most, and shared soft laughter over burnt pancakes and spilled tea. It was too easy, too natural. But every night, when Lila retreated to her room, Ethan felt the old ache return, that tug of wanting something he didn't deserve. One night, she caught him sketching by the fire, something no one had seen him do in years. You draw? She asked, surprised. Used to. Haven't in a long time. She leaned closer, studying the page. It was a half-finished portrait, a woman's face, gentle but incomplete. She looks sad, Lila said softly. She was, Ethan replied. My sister. She died a few years ago. Lila's breath caught. I'm sorry. He shrugged, but his voice cracked. I tried to save her. I couldn't. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Lila whispered, You did what you could. Sometimes love isn't enough to stop the pain. He met her eyes, and for once, didn't look away. You sound like you know that firsthand. She smiled sadly. Maybe I do. That night, long after she'd gone to bed, Ethan stood by the window, watching the rain ease into a drizzle. He didn't know what this was. Friendship, connection, something deeper, but he knew it was changing him. She was changing him. And as much as he tried to resist, a single truth was becoming clear. He didn't want her to leave. It was supposed to be just another quiet morning. But Ethan noticed something strange the moment he walked into the kitchen. Lila wasn't humming. She stood by the counter, pale and trembling, staring at her phone. He frowned. "Lila? What's wrong?" She quickly locked the screen and forced a smile. "Nothing. Just a wrong number." But her eyes betrayed her, wide, frightened, full of something he'd never seen before. He didn't press her. Not yet. That afternoon, while she was out walking the property, Ethan received a call from his assistant, Jenna. "Ethan, you need to see this," she said. "There's been a major shakeup in the Hamilton group." He froze. "Hamilton? As in?" "Yeah. They're back in the news. The CEO's been hospitalized. Apparently, his daughter vanished months ago after some kind of scandal." Ethan's pulse kicked. "What daughter?" Jenna hesitated. "Lila Hamilton." The world stopped. The name hit him like thunder. Lila. No. It couldn't be. He ended the call and walked toward the window, every muscle locked in disbelief. His mind raced. Flashes of her expensive diction, the way she sometimes spoke of things no homeless girl should know, her reluctance to explain how she ended up on the street. Pieces began to fit painfully. When she came back inside that evening, drenched from her walk, he was waiting for her in the living room. "Who are you really?" he asked quietly. She froze. "What? Don't lie to me." His tone was calm, but underneath it burned the quiet fury of betrayal. "You said you had nowhere to go. You said you had no one." "I don't," she whispered. "Your last name is Hamilton, isn't it?" Her breath caught. Silence filled the space between them. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she finally said, voice shaking. "Yes, my name is Lila Hamilton." Ethan turned away, jaw tightening. "So you're that Hamilton. The daughter of the man who ruined my family's company." "I didn't know." "You didn't know?" he snapped. "Your father stole everything from me. My father lost his business, his health, and you expect me to believe you didn't know?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I wasn't part of it. I left home because of it." He didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind screamed liar, but his heart whispered listen. Lila stepped closer, her voice trembling. "You want the truth? Fine." She sank into the couch, hugging her knees like a frightened child. "My father, he's not the man people think he is. He was ruthless, yes, controlling, cold. But he wasn't just cruel to his rivals, Ethan. He was cruel to me." Ethan's anger faltered. "I lived in that mansion like a prisoner," she continued. "Every move I made was watched. I wasn't allowed friends, wasn't allowed to love anyone who wasn't approved. When I found out what he did to your company, I confronted him. He told me I didn't understand business, and when I said I'd go public, he locked me in a clinic under the pretense of rehabilitation." Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. "I escaped. I ran with nothing. I thought I could disappear and start over." The room fell silent except for her quiet sobs. Ethan felt something inside him shift, anger colliding with compassion, disbelief melting into sorrow. He sat across from her, his voice softer now. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you'd look at me the way you are right now," she whispered. "Like I'm part of the man who destroyed you." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Lila, you should have trusted me." "I tried," she said. "But I didn't think I deserved it." Later that night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He walked through the quiet halls of his house, her words echoing in his mind. In his office he found the file, the old, dust-covered folder marked Hamilton Group vs. Coal Industries. The lawsuit that had cost his father everything. He opened it, staring at the headlines, the numbers, the letters of deceit. But now, as he read the name Hamilton, all he could see was Lila, the girl who made coffee in his kitchen, who laughed in the rain, who had been running from a cage all her life. He realized she wasn't her father's legacy. She was his victim too. The next morning, he found her outside, sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in one of his blankets, watching the sunrise. He stood silently beside her for a while before speaking. "I read the file last night." She turned to him cautiously. "And," he sighed, "and I realized I've been holding on to anger for too long. Toward your family. Toward everything that happened. I thought forgiving meant letting them win. But maybe it just means letting myself breathe again." Lila's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, I never wanted to hurt you." He shook his head. "I know." A long pause. Then he said softly, "You can stay as long as you need. Not because I pity you, but because I don't think you've had a home in a long time." Her lips trembled. "Thank you." When she looked up at him, the morning light painted her face in gold, fragile, hopeful, real. For the first time since he met her, she didn't look like a secret or a storm. She looked like peace. That night, after she'd gone to bed, Ethan found the drawing he'd been working on. Only now, the face wasn't of his sister. He had erased and redrawn it, softer, warmer. It was Lila. He stared at it for a long time before whispering, "What are you doing to me? Would you forgive someone connected to the person who once destroyed your life, if their heart was nothing like their past?" Share your thoughts below. This one's tough. The rain had finally stopped. For the first time in weeks, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Ethan's home, scattering gold across the hardwood floors. The air smelled of coffee and warmth, simple things that felt like a luxury after all the chaos. Lila stood by the counter, sleeves rolled up, humming again. The same soft tune that used to float through the house before secrets and storms had silenced it. Ethan watched her from the doorway, arms folded, his heart heavier and lighter than he wanted to admit. She turned when she noticed him. "Morning." He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd make breakfast." "You've done enough for me." "I'm not complaining," he said, leaning against the frame. "Smells human." Lila laughed softly, shaking her head. "That's not a compliment, Ethan." "Sure it is. You're finally turning this house into something more than an empty museum." That made her pause. She glanced around at the home, pristine, beautiful, lifeless, and then back at him. "You live here, but it doesn't feel like you live here." He looked away. "I used to think silence meant peace. And now it just feels lonely." Her gaze softened. "You don't have to keep being alone." The words landed like a whisper from somewhere deeper than the moment. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything neither of them could say aloud. After breakfast, they worked together on his rooftop garden, something Ethan had started years ago but abandoned after his father's death. Lila crouched beside a row of wilted herbs, gloved hands in the soil. "You really let this place die, huh?" He smirked. "I got busy building empires." "Well," she said, brushing dirt off her cheek, "you can't exactly grow peace in boardrooms." Her words made him chuckle, but they also made him think. They spent hours there, her teaching him how to care for the fragile plants, him learning to slow down. When she laughed, the sound carried in the breeze like something weightless, something healing. At one point, he caught her brushing hair from her face, sunlight spilling over her skin, and something in him ached, not the kind of ache that wounds, but the kind that reminds you you're still alive. Later that afternoon, they sat in the living room, drinking tea. The television played softly in the background, but neither was paying attention. Ethan looked at her. "You know, I used to hate your father's name. Couldn't hear it without wanting to destroy something." "I don't blame you," she murmured. He exhaled slowly. "But I don't feel that anymore. I see you now. And somehow, that makes everything else feel smaller." Lila blinked, surprised by the confession. "Ethan, I'm not saying I've figured this out," he continued. But I know what it's like to lose everything. And I know what it's like to think you don't deserve another chance. She looked down at her hands, tears glinting in her eyes. You make it sound like you're talking about both of us. Maybe I am. She smiled faintly. Then maybe we both deserve a second chance. Their eyes met, steady, unguarded. The world outside seemed to fade until there was only that moment, that truth, that fragile connection they'd built out of pain and patience. As dusk fell, the generator lights hummed to life. They cooked dinner together, if you could call it cooking. Burnt pasta, oversalted sauce, and laughter that filled the house louder than any music ever had. When Lila reached to hand him a dish, their fingers brushed. The touch lingered. Too long. Too much. Ethan's breath caught. You should, watch the sauce, he muttered, stepping back. Lila looked at him, not with confusion, but with understanding. She could feel the pull between them, the quiet gravity neither of them dared to name. I'm watching, she said softly. He turned away, pretending to stir something, but his hands were shaking. That night, they ended up sitting outside on the porch again, sharing a blanket, watching the stars stretch over the horizon. It's been years since I looked at the sky, Ethan admitted. I forgot how big it is. That's because you were always looking down, she teased. He smiled faintly. Maybe. But lately, I've been learning to look up again. She turned her head, her eyes meeting his. And what do you see? He hesitated, then whispered, hope. Lila's heart clenched. No one had ever said something that pure to her before. I'm glad, she said, her voice trembling. Because that's what you gave me too. The silence that followed was heavy, electric. He reached for her hand, hesitated, then stopped himself. I don't want to hurt you, he said. You won't, she whispered. Unless you stop being kind. He smiled, looking down. That might be the first time someone said that to me. Then they weren't paying attention. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel like the CEO, or the man with everything to lose. He felt human. And for Lila, it was the first time she wasn't running, she was home. The porch light flickered above them, but neither moved. The night air grew colder, yet they stayed there. Two souls who had lost faith in love, now quietly finding it in each other's company. Neither said, I love you. They didn't have to. Some things don't need words, just a heartbeat that finally feels safe. Morning came quietly. Lila woke to sunlight spilling across the guestroom floor. The same light that once felt foreign now felt like warmth. She stretched, smiled faintly, and for the first time in months, she felt safe. Downstairs, she could hear Ethan's voice. Calm, professional, clipped, talking to someone on the phone. It was a tone she hadn't heard since before she knew who he really was. The CEO, the man who controlled boardrooms and markets with just a sentence. She went downstairs, still tying her hair, but froze when she saw who was sitting in the living room. A man in a navy suit, tall, composed, carrying an expensive briefcase. His presence screamed corporate. Ethan ended the call and turned. His expression, caught between shock and guilt, told her this wasn't just a meeting. Lila, he began carefully, this is Mark Ellison. He's from Monroe Global Holdings. The world tilted. Monroe. Her last name. Her father's company. Mark rose, smiling tightly. Miss Monroe. It's good to see you safe. Your father's been worried. Lila's throat tightened. You shouldn't be here. Mark ignored that. He's willing to bring you home, no questions asked. The press is circling again. It's better you come with me before things. Stop. Ethan's voice cut sharp. You didn't tell me this. Mark's smile thinned. She didn't tell you a lot, Mr. Cole. Lila's stomach dropped. The room suddenly felt smaller, suffocating. Ethan turned toward her. Is this true? You knew all this time who I was dealing with, who your father was. Her eyes brimmed with tears. Ethan, I didn't mean to. You let me help you live here, trust you, and you knew your father was the man who destroyed my company, my name. He stopped himself, voice breaking. Lila, you lied to me. I didn't lie, she cried. I just didn't tell you. I didn't know how. Every time I tried, I saw what his name did to you. So you decided to let me fall for a ghost of you, he snapped, bitterness replacing pain. She took a step closer. You think this was a game? That I wanted this to happen? I was homeless, Ethan. You saw me at my lowest, and you still think I was playing you? Silence. The kind that stings more than shouting. Mark cleared his throat awkwardly. Mr. Cole, the Monroes appreciate your hospitality. But Lila's return is a family matter. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then take her. The words fell like glass. Lila's breath hitched. Ethan. He looked away, unable to meet her eyes. You should go home, Lila. That's where you belong. I belong here, she whispered, voice shaking. With you. He closed his eyes. No. You belong to a world I'll never fit in. Mark placed a hand on her arm, guiding her toward the door. She didn't resist, not because she wanted to leave, but because Ethan didn't stop her. As the door closed behind her, the house felt colder than it ever had before. That evening, Ethan sat alone in the dim living room, the smell of coffee and rain heavy in the air. Her mug was still on the table. The scarf she'd left draped over the chair, untouched. He stared at it for hours, anger and longing twisting together like poison. He replayed every smile, every moment, every touch, now tainted by that one unbearable thought: she hid who she was. Yet the part that hurt most wasn't the lie. It was that she had loved him despite it. He finally stood, grabbed the scarf, and threw it in the trash. But when it hit the bin, he froze, then picked it up again, clutching it to his chest, breath shaking. Meanwhile, Lila sat in the back of a black car, city lights blurring past her like memories she didn't want to lose. Her father's estate loomed ahead, towering, glittering, cold. Inside, Mr. Monroe waited. His face softened when she entered, but his tone carried steel. You've caused enough trouble, Lila. The tabloids are calling you the runaway heiress. Do you know what that does to our reputation? She met his eyes, for once unafraid. Do you know what it does to your daughter? His expression hardened. You had everything, and you ran off with a man who would ruin us. Ethan never ruined me, she said. He saved me. Her father turned away. You're young. You'll understand one day. No, she whispered. You never will. Days passed. Lila wandered through marble hallways that echoed with everything she'd lost. The warmth of Ethan's home, his quiet humor, the smell of burnt pasta, all gone. She tried to call him. He never answered. Each missed call felt like another piece of her heart breaking. A week later, a charity gala was held, her father's idea to restore the family image. Lila stood by his side, smiling for cameras she wanted to hide from. Then, across the room, she froze. Ethan. He was there, standing with a partner, speaking to investors, his expression perfectly unreadable. But when his eyes found hers, everything stilled. 1,000 words passed in silence. Pain. Regret. Longing. Love. She took a step forward, but he turned away first. Her throat closed. She excused herself and ran outside, tears spilling faster than she could wipe them away. Under the golden lights of the parking lot, she whispered into the night. Why does love hurt most when it's real? Inside, Ethan stood near the window, watching her leave. His chest ached, his fists clenched, his mask cracking. He had told himself this was for the best. That letting her go was mercy. But mercy never felt this cruel. Would you have forgiven someone who hid a truth like that, or would you walk away like Ethan did? Be honest, which side of this heartbreak would you be on? Nights felt longer without her laughter echoing through the house. Ethan had returned to his routines, or at least, the hollow versions of them. The morning meetings, the sterile office, the polite smiles at business lunches. Yet, beneath the surface everything was noise. He'd built an empire on logic, precision, and control. But love had undone him in the simplest, most human way, by making him feel. He sat in his study one night, scrolling through unread emails. One caught his eye. It was from an unknown sender. No subject, just an attachment. He hesitated, then opened it. A photo appeared, grainy but unmistakable. Lila, standing outside a children's hospital, laughing with a group of nurses. She was volunteering, holding a teddy bear as a child hugged her. The caption, typed in simple black text, read, "For the people who need her most, she's still showing up." Ethan's chest tightened. She wasn't hiding behind her father's name. She was working, giving. The girl he thought had deceived him was still the same woman who once stayed up until dawn helping a stranger recover. He leaned back, eyes burning. "I let her go," he whispered, "because I was afraid." For the first time in years, fear had ruled him, not logic. Fear of pain, of being fooled again, of trusting what felt too good to be true. He stood, grabbing his coat. Across town, in her father's mansion, Lila stood at the balcony, watching rain trace lines down the glass. It had been weeks since she last saw Ethan. The nights replayed in her head, the kindness in his voice, the way he'd laughed when she spilled coffee on his desk, the quiet ache in his eyes when he looked at her. She pressed her hands against the railing, heart heavy. Her father stepped in quietly behind her. Still thinking about him? She didn't turn. "Always." He sighed, almost weary. "You're my daughter. I only wanted to protect you." "Protect me from what?" she asked softly. "Happiness." He hesitated, words faltering. "He's not our kind, Lila. He doesn't understand our world." She finally turned, meeting his gaze. "Then I'll build a new one." Her father stared, realization dawning that he had lost her in ways deeper than distance. Later that night, she drove herself back to the city. No security, no driver, just her and the rain. The road blurred, her heart pounding with each turn. She didn't know what she'd say if she saw him, or if he'd even open the door. But she had to try. She'd learned that love doesn't wait for timing, or pride, or certainty. It just shows up. Ethan arrived at the hospital that next morning. He asked for her at the volunteer desk, his voice softer than usual. The nurse smiled knowingly. "You just missed her. She left for the community shelter downtown." Of course. The shelter. The place where he'd first seen her broken and afraid. He drove there, heart racing. When he arrived, the rain had stopped, but the air was still heavy, gray. Through the window, he saw her, tying her hair back, helping a child zip his jacket. Her smile, tired, tender, was the same one that had once undone him completely. He stood there for a long moment, unable to move. Every voice in his head said walk away. But his heart, the part that had been silent for too long, whispered go. He pushed open the door. Lila looked up, startled, her hands freezing mid-motion. For a moment, no words passed, just the raw electricity of a connection reignited. "Ethan," she breathed. He stepped closer, his expression torn between apology and longing. "You were right. About everything." Her eyes glistened. "I didn't want to hurt you." "I know," he said quietly. "I was just too proud to admit I was already hurt. Not by you, by the past. By what your father did. And I punished you for his sins." Tears filled her eyes. "You think saying that fixes it?" He shook his head. "No. But it's a start." The silence between them was fragile, trembling like the first breath after a storm. He took another step forward. "You asked me once what love really was. I think it's this, coming back even when it hurts." Her lips parted, trembling. "You really mean that?" "I wouldn't be here if I didn't." For a heartbeat, she just stood there, searching his face for the man she once trusted. And she found him. Slowly, she nodded, tears spilling freely now. "Then don't leave again." "I won't," he whispered. She stepped closer, resting her forehead against his chest. His arms came around her, holding her the way you hold something you thought was lost forever. The world around them, the shelter noise, the city hum, all faded away. For the first time, there were no lies, no walls. Just two people who had both finally chosen each other. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds. The light hit the wet pavement, glimmering like gold, as if even the city itself was exhaling relief. The morning light filtered softly through the shelter's high windows, painting gold lines across the floor where Ethan and Lila still stood. The world felt quieter now, not because it had changed, but because they had. In the silence that followed their reunion, 1,000 unsaid things hung between them. And yet, for once, the silence didn't hurt. It healed. Ethan finally exhaled, resting his forehead against hers. "You have no idea how many times I almost came back," he murmured. "I stopped counting," Lila whispered, her fingers tracing the edge of his sleeve. "But I never stopped hoping." Those words undid him completely. He kissed her, not with desperation this time, but with peace. The kind that only comes when the storm has passed. They spent the next hour at the shelter, side by side, handing out food and sorting supplies. Neither spoke much. They didn't need to. The way he'd glance at her when she laughed with a child, the way her hand brushed his as they worked, it all said what words couldn't. When it was time to leave, Ethan turned to her, eyes steady. "Come with me." She hesitated. "Where?" "Home," he said simply. Lila blinked. "Ethan, I don't think." He cut her off softly. "It's not about the house. It's about us. You belong with me, not because I want to fix you, or protect you, or save you, but because you are my home." Her lips parted, trembling. "You mean that?" "I've never meant anything more." They left together. The city looked different now, not as cold, not as gray. Maybe because they'd both stopped seeing it through the eyes of loss. Back at Ethan's penthouse, memories came flooding back. The night she'd first stayed there, frightened and shivering. The time she'd made him laugh for the first time in years. The morning she'd left, taking his peace with her. Now, as she stepped inside again, everything felt full circle. "I kept this," Ethan said quietly, reaching into a drawer. He pulled out the scarf she'd worn the first night he found her, still faintly smelling of rain and her. "I couldn't throw it away." Lila smiled faintly, touching the soft fabric. "I thought you'd forgotten me." "Never," he said. "I just didn't know how to remember you without hurting." She met his eyes. "So what now?" He smiled, a real one this time, lighter than it had been in years. "Now we stop surviving. We start living." Weeks passed. Slowly, their world rebuilt itself. Ethan resigned from 2 of his board positions, focusing instead on his foundation, the one he'd started in memory of his mother. Only this time, he made Lila co-director. The media went wild when they appeared together at a charity event, hand in hand. Some whispered, some speculated, but neither of them cared. Lila had learned not to measure herself by anyone's expectations, not her father's, not society's, not even Ethan's. She'd found strength in her own story. One evening, as they watched the sun dip behind the skyline, Lila rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about how strange it is?" she said softly. "You were supposed to hate everything connected to my father, and I was supposed to be ashamed of everything I lost. But somehow, we found love in the wreckage." Ethan chuckled quietly. "Maybe that's the only place real love exists, in the mess. Where it's earned, not handed." She smiled. "Maybe." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. He opened it, not a grand, glittering diamond, but a simple, elegant ring. "This isn't about forgetting the past," he said quietly. "It's about building something better from it. Will you marry me?" Tears shimmered in her eyes. "You sure you want to do this again?" He smiled, eyes soft. "Only with you." She laughed, that bright, unguarded sound he loved. "Then yes, Ethan Cole." "Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, their fingers intertwining as if the universe had been waiting for that moment all along. Their wedding wasn't extravagant. It was small, intimate, held in the garden behind the shelter where they'd reunited. The same children they'd helped ran around tossing petals. Lila wore a simple lace dress. Ethan couldn't stop looking at her like she was sunlight. When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," Ethan didn't hesitate. He pulled her close, and the crowd erupted in laughter and applause. The sky above them was the color of promise, soft gold and pale blue. As they walked down the aisle together, Lila whispered, "Do you ever think about that night in the rain?" He smiled. "Every day. It's when everything truly began." Later that evening, they returned home, where the city lights stretched endlessly beneath them. Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You changed everything," he murmured. Lila turned slightly, her voice warm. "You did too. You made me believe in second chances." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Funny thing about second chances," he said softly. "Sometimes they're just the first ones we weren't ready for." Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, gentle, cleansing, familiar. Ethan smiled as he looked out the window. "Seems like it's come full circle." Lila grinned. "Then let's not run from it this time." They stepped out onto the balcony together, laughing as the rain fell harder. Their laughter mingled with the sound of thunder, not fearful this time, but alive. For them, the storm had never been the end. It had been the beginning all along. Do you believe people can truly find love again after heartbreak, even with the same person who once broke them? Share your thoughts in the comments. Love didn't save them, they saved each other. Kindness lit the spark. Truth rebuilt the bridge. And in the rain where it all began, Ethan and Lila finally found home. Love stories like Ethan and Lila's remind us that hope can rise even from heartbreak. If you believe in second chances, hit like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell to stay with us for more unforgettable journeys.